We've got a pretty nice little drum mix happening now, but I want to look at some ways of getting the snare drum reverb to sound a bit more colorful and interesting. Now to start with, I'm going to create a new send here, and I'm going to go new track, and I'll have it create a mono bus this time, and I'm going to call it through snare because we're not really going to be feeding it to the output. We're going to be using it as a routing stage to get to the reverb for the snare, but we'll get to that. So here we go. There's our through snare. And I'm going to leave the output set to 1-2 for now. Now let's solo this. And this through snare send here, I want to make this pre-fader so that even when this isn't soloed, we'll hear it. So let's unsolo everything and hear just that. We should hear the snare through here now. Let me snap this up to unity gain. Okay, so we can hear there's a lot of leakage on that snare. I want to start by putting a gate in so that the snare that we're sending to the reverb is going to be gated and it'll only be the snare. Because right now, what we have happening is we have this main snare track going to this bigger hall reverb. And I'm going to mute that for now because I don't want to send it from here. What I want to do is send it from this through aux track. So we're going to clean it up here and color it before we send it on to the reverb. So let's dial up some gate here so that we can hear just the snare and isolate it. So I want to set the threshold so just the snare is coming through. Get the full body of it. That works nicely. So we've gated out everything else. I could in fact do this on the main snare track, it wouldn't hurt, but for now we're doing it here. And what I want to do is now create a send here going to that main reverb. Let's go over here, and this is our main reverb that we're using, and that's what I fed this into. And let's try and match the levels. This is pre-fader, so I have this one I think at -9 dB, and this one I'll put at -9 dB as well. And we can control the amount that's sent via the main slider. So let me just get this down to -9. There we go. And what I'm going to do is assign the output to no output. So we're not going to hear this track. We're just using it to process the snare sound before it gets sent to the reverb. I'll dial this down to about -3.5, and we should have a pretty close approximation of what it sounds like. There we go. What it sounds like comparing it to this one where it's not gated. So let's solo all the drums again, and let's hear that. And I can use this to send more or less to the reverb, or of course I can use this. All right, so that works great. We're sending to the same reverb, and we've cleaned it up so only the snare is getting to that longer reverb. We've gated everything else out. But why stop there? We can color the sound some more. Let's put this back to the main output. And again, I'm going to unsolo everything and go back to just this. And let's try some other plugins. Let's try really coloring the sound. I'll try some distortion. Let's get this gate a bit tighter. There we go. There we go. So we've got it really distorted. It's really distorted. All right, now that sounds terrible on its own, of course, but we're not going to be using it for that. We're going to be using it just to feed the reverb. So it gives it a trashier kind of quality. And without the distortion, and with it, let's hear what it sounds like in context with the full drum group. Maybe a bit less. So it really gives some unique personality to that snare reverb. And just for fun, let's see what happens if we send to our drum reverb from here as well. Here's our drum verb. I'll snap it up to unity gain, and let's mute this send. We'll need less of that. Let's mute that. All right, so that's one possibility, but we can experiment with coloring it differently even. Let's put it back to the main output so we can hear it again. And again, I'll isolate it. And let's mute this one and try something else. Let's try a guitar amp plugin. Let's try some Amplitude 3. And this is free to download. There's a free version with some basic presets that are available. It's got some spring reverb on it by default. But let's go to one of the presets. Let's try the complete rigs. Go to extreme, because we're not looking for something realistic here. Let's try some extreme EQ. So that's sending a bit of a darker sound to the EQ. So now, with this plugin muted, and we're just going to hear the amplitude, let's take this back out of the main outputs and hear what it sounds like through the reverb. That's the straight snare. I'll boost it so we can hear it. And now with amplitude. And again, let's hear it in context now with the full drum mix. Let's try both of them. And the drum verb. Let's try this one as well. So you see how you can really get the reverb component of the snare to sound nice and trashy. Let's see what it sounds like in the full mix. Now, I'm not saying I particularly will go with this specific setting for this specific song, but just want to show you some ways here of coloring the send that's going to the reverb, and it works great, especially for the snare. Of course, we could do this for the whole drum kit if we wanted, but just to get your imagination going, experiment and don't be afraid to color the send before it arrives at the reverb.